Let's talk about test coverage reporting. Test coverage reporting is a simple metric we can use to know the amount of our software we have tested. The best way to understand this is with a demonstration. We are going to install a package called NYC, which is going to help us generate test coverage reporting for our application. Now that we've installed it, in the package.json we can modify our test script and we'll run NYC mocha. And this is going to run NYC, and NYC is going to run before mocha to gather all the test coverage from mocha. Let's run it and see what we get. Now we'll run npm test, and look at that. We have a generated table here which contains a report. This report gives us statistics about the number of statements we have in specific files, the number of functions, the number of branches, the number of lines, and the uncovered lines in that file. So look at this. In our add function, we've covered 100% of all the statements. So this statistics gives us how much of these files we have tested. Let's take an example, our add.js file. It says we've covered 100% of all statements, all branches, all functions, all lines, and we have no uncovered lines, which means that for the test we wrote for the add function, this tested all the functionality in this file. Now if we check out the users.js file, it says we've covered only 61% of the statements, and this is a list of all lines that we haven't covered. For example, let's check out the users.js, and you can see it says we haven't covered line 4, 5, 6, 8. So if we check out line 4, it's the line that returns a promise. Line 5, it's a set timeout. Line 6 is where we find the user. Line 8 is where we throw an exception if the user was not found. Line 12 is where we return a resolve. So it basically tells us we haven't tested this function in our application. How cool is that? With test coverage reporting, we can know exactly which part of our applications have been tested and which parts have not been tested. To verify that our coverage works correctly, let's add a test for one of these functions to see if these lines are actually covered. Let's write a test for our user find user by ID function. We are going to describe that function, and we are going to say it should find a user by ID. And we have a bunch of ways for testing asynchronous functions. In this case, I'm going to stick with async await. So constant response is going to be equal to await find user by ID, and we'll pass ID of 1. Then I'm going to assert.equal response.message to be equal to user found successfully. Okay, so now let's run our test. We have 8 successful tests, and if you look at the users.js file, the coverage has increased, and the only line we have not tested is line 9. And if we go to the user.js file and check out line 9, it's the situation for rejection for find user by ID. Let's add one final test so that that line is covered. So we're going to say should reject if user is not found by ID. And how do we test rejected promises? We return the promise, and we'll pass in 90 because we know the user with ID of 90 does not exist in our database. So we are going to return find user by ID dot then, and if it doesn't throw, we are going to assert dot fail expected find user by ID function to throw. And the second argument to the dot then is going to be a function that handles the real assertion. So we'll get the error and would assert dot equal error.message to be user with ID of 90 was not found. And now let's run our test. We have 9 successful tests, and you can see that the coverage for the users.js file is 100%. So code coverage gives us statistics about how much of our code has been tested.